Hi, Dave. Mr. Davis, we are live and ready to go whenever you choose. Mr. Davis, I still have you on mute, or you are still on mute.
Would help to do that to start the meeting. Okay, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our meeting of the MTD Board of Directors. I'm going to do a roll call of the Board of Directors. Director Perotti is absent. Director McQuarrie, you want to unmute, Chuck, and let me know?
Here, I'm here.
That's great. Director Weinberg?
Here.
There you go. Director Rodriguez?
Present.
Director Sheeler? He's down there connecting the audio, but I don't know that if he's connected. He's trying to be here. Okay, we will skip over Bill and let him reconnect at some point during the meeting. Vice Chair Tabor.
Here.
And Chair Davis is present. So we do have a quorum. That takes me to item number 3. That's the report regarding the posting of the agenda. Christina?
Yes, sir. The agenda was posted on Thursday, September 10th, 2020, on the agenda list and posted to MTD's website.
Good. Thank you very much. We'll move us to the consent calendar. There are 2 items here. Item number 4 is the approval of the prior minutes for the meeting of September 1st, 2020. And item 5, the cash report for the periods April 22nd through September 4th, 2020. Are there any questions or comments from board members on the consent calendar?
Mr. Chair, I'd move for approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, I have a motion to approve from Mr. Tabor. Do I have a second?
Second.
I will take Director Rodriguez. I will do a roll call vote. Director McQuarrie.
Yes.
Director Weinberg.
Yes.
Director Rodriguez.
Yes.
Director Sheeler.
Yes.
Director Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
And Chair Davis votes yes. The consent calendar is unanimously approved. Very good. Takes us to after the consent calendar, takes us to item 6. This is public comment. This is the place for anyone in the public to comment on things that are not on our agenda today. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone who has raised their hands who wish to speak under public comment?
There are no public comments at this time.
Okay, no public comment at this time. Takes us right into our main agenda items, starting with item 7. This is the conflict of interest code update. Mr. Estrada?
Yes, Chair Davis, members of the board, I'm Jerry Estrada, General Manager, MTD. Good morning. This item should be fairly straightforward. We're required to update our conflict of interest policy code every few years. MTD's legal counsel has reviewed the current policy and has recommended a few changes pertaining to Form 700 Statement of Economic Interest, the manner of reporting. At this point, MTD staff recommends that the board approve the changes.
Great. Okay. With that, we'll go to board questions. Are there any questions from board members? Director Rodriguez.
Thank you. Good morning. It's just those 2 changes about a leasehold, correct? It's just those 2 changes, it looks like? Or
That's
is
correct.
it? Okay. Why was the change made? They wanted to go from, they wanted to make sure that that it was covered as an interest, not just like if you were an owner, but also a leasehold, which gave you some kind of interest. Do you know why the change?
I do not know the specific change. It's a state requirement, and we need to modify, but it's something we can follow up if you're interested, and we can look into that.
No. I'm just doing some real estate stuff right now, and I'm reading about it and going, oh, that's interesting that they changed it from a lease, that they added the leasehold interest, but that's fine. That's fine. Those were the only 2 things, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this point from the board? Okay, not hearing. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone who wishes to speak on the item?
There are no public comments for this item.
Okay, takes us back then to board comments and or a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Director Rodriguez. Do I have a second? I have a second by Director McQuarrie. Okay. Roll call vote. Director Prodi is absent. Director McQuarrie. Unmute, Chuck.
Yes.
Yes. Director Weinberg.
Yes.
Director Rodriguez.
Yes.
Director Sheeler.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
Chair Davis votes yes. The motion passes 6 with 1 absent. That takes us, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Estrada. That takes us to item 8, the SCE Charge Ready Heavy Duty Infrastructure Grant Application. You want to open this, Mr. Estrada?
Yes, thank you. This is an exciting opportunity for MTD, in my opinion, and I wanted to acknowledge Mr. Grip's work. He'll be providing you with the presentation to get into the details and answer questions about this opportunity. Mr. Grip is our capital projects manager here at MTD. He's done a great deal of work to get us to this point. You may have noticed our light duty program with our relief vehicles, the Chevy Bolts, are now functioning. That's also a result of an SCE Charge Ready Transport Program grant. This is the next step for a heavy duty grant, and Ryan's here to provide you with the details. Mr. Grip, it's all yours.
Good morning, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Chair Davis, Mr. Estrada, members of the board. Good morning. I'll start with the recommendation. We are requesting that the board authorize the general manager to execute the Charge Ready Transport Program participation agreement that's included with the packet with Southern California Edison. This will result in the design and construction of what SCE terms as make-ready infrastructure for 14 heavy-duty charge ports here at Terminal 1. A little bit of background. So SCE's Charge Ready program, as Mr. Estrada mentioned, was developed to accelerate the adoption of EVs within SCE's service territory, really to aid in the state's environmental goals. MTD's experience with Charge Ready, Mr. Estrada already mentioned it, through the Charge Ready Bridge program, that's their light duty program. We were able to have SCE install 14 light duty charge ports. That also came with a new meter, new switch gear, and a pole mounted transformer. So that's all SCE, that's all equipment provided by SCE through the program at no cost to MTD. In addition, on the light duty side, SCE also provided us with a rebate for the light duty chargers. The total rebate amount for all 14 of those light duty chargers was about $7,300, so fairly significant. The proposed project here, this is on the heavy duty side as opposed to the light duty side. What we're looking for is charging infrastructure for 14 heavy duty vehicles under the maintenance canopy with the raised bay. So that was the one where several years ago we renovated the canopy. It's in our yard here at Terminal 1. SCE will cover all of the design and construction costs as they did for the light duty program. And it will also include new switchgear and an upsized pad mounted transformer. Now, the reason that's significant is we're really at capacity right now. In terms of our power draw here at MTD, we could not add in any more charging infrastructure than what we already have. So this is significant, and it's a very costly piece of equipment, this transformer that they will be installing as a part of this project. MTD will be responsible for all of the infrastructure after the disconnect. And basically what that is that will be some cabling that we'll have to do from the disconnects to the chargers themselves, and we'll also be responsible for the installation of the chargers. So that will be our responsibility, and that project would take place concurrently with the work that SCE would be doing. The program participation agreement, as I mentioned, it is attached to the packet. The agreement itself provides standard boilerplate language. It cannot be altered. That is something that we discussed with SCE. It's something that they provide to all of their charge-ready transport applicants. Now, the fact that we were provided the agreement is a good sign. We've done some preliminary work. They came out here, performed a site assessment. We came up with kind of a preliminary design, and that design has been approved. So the fact that they provided us with the participation agreement means that they intend to move forward if the board authorizes the general manager to go ahead and execute the agreement. SCE, as a part of this project, does cover the maintenance and replacement of any equipment that they go ahead and install as a result of the project. One important note, and you all probably noticed this as a part of the agreement, there is a clawback provision, and that clawback provision requires that MTD purchase the number of buses and chargers commensurate with the charge ports installed as a result of this project. So in essence, what that means, we intend to have SCE install 14 charge ports. That means within the contract term, it's a 10-year term, we need to have 14 buses and 14 chargers utilizing that infrastructure. If we don't, based upon the contract, SCE could claw back anything that we have not done. So if we purchase 10 buses and put in 10 chargers, and we have a balance of 4 at the end, then potentially they could come after us for the cost of installing those 4. Now, the good thing is that is based upon the depreciated value at that time. So over a 10-year time horizon, the depreciated value of this equipment is going to be fairly minimal. But it is important to be aware of. And the other thing is, I will also be bringing to the board during this meeting a recommendation for the acquisition of 4 battery electric buses. If the board approves, that'll get us already 4 into that 14 over that 10-year time horizon. In terms of budget and funding, as you can see, no cost to program participants other than the acquisition of the buses and the chargers themselves. And the project is eligible for a rebate of up to $20,500 for the 14 heavy-duty chargers that we'll be procuring over that 10-year time horizon. And finally, in terms of implementation, should the board choose to authorize the general manager to move forward, from the time of contract execution to when we can actually utilize that infrastructure, it will be about 6 months is what SCE is estimating currently. And that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you very much for that good presentation.
Thank you.
Board, are there any questions of Mr. Grip or Mr. Estrada at this time? I'll go to Mr. Sheeler and then I'll come to Mr. Tabor. Bill?
Okay, Mr. Tabor, I have a few questions, so I appreciate your patience. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank the ratepayers of Southern California Edison for helping to fund this project. Just to put it back into context, because I don't recall this coming before the Facilities Committee recently, how does this fit in with the overall strategy of our facilities master plan for T1 and T2?
I can take that question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's really the next logical step for us. That particular canopy was upgraded a few years ago to support photovoltaic system. The next step after this, assuming the board were to approve this, we'd pretty much be maxed out on our canopy space for charging. So the next step, I think, will be seriously looking at some type of microgrid with battery storage to support resiliency at Terminal 1. From a facilities master plan perspective, we will need Terminal 2 to alleviate some of the pressure off this site and move some vehicles out there to offload, essentially. And we're going to have to build out Terminal 2 as well. So it's really the first step in a very long process.
Thank you. My next question is Stantec aware of this? Are they involved in this in any way?
Stantec is not involved in this particular project at this point. They are wrapping up the facilities master plan with some work related to ZEB plan that we owe the state of California. They are a bidder on our third item on this particular agenda. So I think I should be careful about what I say at this point because we have an agenda item
Right.
later to discuss Stantec.
Okay, I was just wondering what their level of involvement, knowing that they were basically our facilities master plan. Where is the discussion with Edison right now on time of use?
Ryan?
So right now, with time of use, we have an EV rate on all of our EV charging infrastructure. So we have the charging infrastructure, 14 light duty charge ports, and then we also have 15 heavy duty charge ports that support our 14 BYD buses. Both of those are metered independently and are under a time of use EV rate. Now that time of use EV rate provides a special rate. It's a special rate structure for electric vehicles that's less expensive than your traditional rate structure. There's also a temporary pause on demand charges, and that's significant to MTD because those demand charges initially when we were deploying the BYD buses were significant. And right now we're getting a break from the demand charges. It's a 5-year break. It started, I think, about 2 years ago. So that's something that MTD will have to be cognizant of in terms of our charging costs in the future when those demand charges start to come back into play. We also are reporting to LCFS, the low carbon fuel standard. We are receiving credits for the usage of the BYD buses, and we have recently added in the charging infrastructure for the Chevrolet Bolts as well. So that kind of all plays in terms of incentives and in terms of charging costs.
Okay, thank you. My next question is the transformer that's being put in, will it be capable of handling the load from whatever the photovoltaic array will generate?
It's an interesting question. So we, in discussions with SCE, we let them know that MTD anticipates adding in PV as well as battery storage. Unfortunately, due to the parameters of the SCE Charge Ready program, it's very narrow. So they cannot fund anything that is kind of outside of their scope. Because that's something that MTD is opting into, it's not part of kind of the Charge Ready program, which is simply installing the infrastructure, the make ready infrastructure, as they call it, for electric vehicle charging. So unfortunately, in terms of the switchgear, in terms of any of the other equipment that will be installed, it would be independent of any type of project that MTD engages in for photovoltaics, for battery storage, and the like. Similarly, with the pad mounted transformer that they intend to install, we kind of hope that they would maybe upsize it to the point where maybe we could get another 20 battery electric buses charging based upon the output of this specific transformer. Unfortunately, once again, they can't do that. Agencies certainly project into the future, but SCE can't fund something that you don't need at that moment. That's part of the Charge Ready guidelines. Now, there will be some extra capacity in this particular transformer that they will be installing, and they'll do it in such a way that if MTD goes back to SCE for more Charge Ready monies, that it'll be easier to install a larger transformer in the future. So one of the things they do think about is, okay, bigger conduit, so that we can pull more cabling in the future. Like I said, provisions to make sure that they're to some degree future proofing, but they can't do that on the equipment side because it would be much, much more expensive if they did that up front.
Thank you for that detailed explanation. Hopefully there is some long-term logic planning and that our facilities master plan will try and take that into account. 2 more questions, if you could please stay with me. When will MTD be approaching the Central Coast Clean Energy for project underwriting, such as a microgrid, since they will be getting in our territory, at least out in Goleta on January 1st?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you on that specifically, Director Sheeler. What I can share with you is that we are working towards a grant submittal with CalSTART and a few other local entities that we plan on bringing to the board at the next meeting, if not the following one, for a California Energy Commission grant opportunity to fund blueprint for medium and heavy duty ZEB deployment. So I think that might be the appropriate time to address that question, if that's acceptable to you.
Okay, I just think that it's important that now that we're being taken into this larger umbrella of this new consortium, that they know what MTD is and what MTD is trying to achieve, because it seems to be in great alignment with their goals. And then the last question was, will MTD's next best purchase be electric or renewable diesel?
Depends
Not
on,
talking about the one we're talking about today.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have one on the agenda today, Bill.
We could save that one for the next one then. I'm done.
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tabor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank Mr. Grip. I know he's been busy over the past months and or a year, and we hope to use your services in the future. My question was about the acquisition plan. I'm assuming that if we deliver the buses prior to those dates, we'd be considered in compliance. But the word acquisition, I know that sometimes it takes years or months to get the buses in our possession. So if we purchase them by December 2029 and it takes 2 years for them to get here, are we in compliance?
That's a great question. What SCE has stated is that we just need to stay in communication with them. It is based upon providing a purchase order, but they do want proof that you've actually received the vehicles, which we would provide through the vehicle registration. They are extremely flexible. That's they've been a great partner on the light duty side, and similarly on the heavy duty side. We talked to them at length about our vehicle acquisition plans, as you know, we have all of that listed out, but we also made very clear to SCE that plans change. And unfortunately, our plans are based upon availability of funding. And as we've seen this year with grant funding opportunities, unfortunately, MTD has been unsuccessful on the vehicle side for a lot of the grant funding opportunities that we've applied to. So to your point, yes, they are flexible. They are aware. We did develop those benchmarks because we thought they were realistic. But if they do change, which they may, we can communicate that to them. I think that their primary focus is that within that 10-year time horizon, that we meet that equipment goal. So the 14 buses and 14 chargers. And if it needs to change from the vehicle acquisition plan that's indicated in the agreement, we could certainly make those changes, and that would be acceptable to SCE.
Other questions from the board?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Director Weinberg. Unmute yourself, Dick. Oh, went off and came back on one more time. There you go. You're on. Oh, now you're back off.
Oh, hold on. Okay, all right.
You're good. Go.
Okay. You talk about the transformer or transformer model and the battery model. What's the difference and why?
Ryan?
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating the question, Director Weinberg? I apologize.
I think his question, Ryan, was the difference between what he called a transformer model and a battery model, right? Where essentially where the power is coming from.
Sure. So the transformer is determined by SCE. That's a piece of equipment that they will acquire and install here, and they base the sizing of the transformer on model predictions that they have in terms of usage. So we express to them the type of vehicle that we will be procuring, and based upon that, they can calculate load demand. And based upon whatever the projected load demand is, then they come up with whatever the size of transformer that they'll be installing. to support the capacity that we need. Like I said, there's probably an upsizing of about 10% that takes place, meaning that if we charged all of our vehicles at one time, we'd probably have 10% of additional capacity left with the transformer that they intend to install, but nothing beyond that, because they can only fund anything that's related to your current acquisitions or your current project, I should say. So that would be, in this case, 14 charge ports. On the battery side, we haven't engaged in that yet. That's something, as General Manager Estrada had alluded to, that would be through the CEC Blueprint grant. That would, in essence, provide us with a detailed plan for creating a microgrid. And within the umbrella of a microgrid, we would have battery storage, photovoltaics, and the like. Determination of the specific types of batteries that will be procured for storage, that will be fleshed out during the creation of the blueprint itself. We have limited space, unfortunately, here at Terminal 1. So that's kind of our primary restriction in terms of determining which battery or batteries we end up procuring for that.
So it's not that a battery operated was a short-term deal and the transformer has more power, or anything. Why do we have the two kinds?
I think, Dick, what Ryan was trying to get to is the transformers dealing with essentially bringing the electricity in from offsite.
Correct.
The battery storage is essentially, if we had photovoltaics, which are generating energy on site, we could capture that into a battery storage on site and then deploy it later when the buses come in at night. So it's capturing the solar photovoltaic energy during the daytime, basically storing that in a battery pack. That's kind of where the future is going, of essentially, rather than bringing it in from offsite, it's actually self-contained. Is that accurate, Ryan?
That's exactly right, Chair Davis. Thank you for that.
Thank you, I guess.
We'll draw you a diagram at some point. It actually makes a lot of sense. Okay, other questions for Ryan or Jerry at this point?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Chad.
Where is this new system going to be installed? Is it going to be along Haley? And is there going to be a bigger canopy installed? I'm having trouble determining where all this is going to take place.
A great question, particularly in a constrained yard. So our existing transformer is at the driveway exit onto South Sepuetas. On the right-hand side, if you were exiting from MTD's yard onto South Sepuetas Street. The new larger transformer will be located in the same place. Then SCE will have to trench from that location over to the canopy to the left. So as you are exiting onto South Sepuetas driveway, on the left-hand side, there's a canopy with a series of bays. One of those bays is actually elevated, a project that we finished, I think, about 3 years ago. That's where all 14 of the charge ports will be located. And like I said, the actual conduit will run from the new transformer over to that bay. And that'll all happen underground. And an important note from the SAF report is that there will be some remediation of existing contaminated soils that will be coordinated through the County of Santa Barbara, but that is a part of SCE's scope of work. Then once they get to the canopy itself, they'll install some new switch gear. That new switch gear is located over by the maintenance offices. If you're familiar with where Nolan Robertson, our maintenance manager's office, is located, just outside of that, there's switch gear, existing switch gear, that supports our old EV charging, as well as electricity into those buildings right there. They will be installing new switch gear there, and then they'll route it from that new switch gear back to the canopy, and that conduit will all be above ground conduit. So those are kind of the locations of the various equipment that will be installed through the project.
Question.
Yeah,
Question,
go ahead, Dick.
what's the reason for having the two different types? Does that give us more flexibility or what?
When you say types, are you referring to the heavy duty and the light duty? For example, the chargers that we have for the Chevy Bolts versus the chargers that we intend to install for the buses. If that's the question, it's really about energy draw. The energy draw for the buses is significantly higher. So you need separate infrastructure for those charge ports versus a much lower energy draw for the light duty vehicles like the Chevrolet Bolts that we have. So that's kind of the distinction. From this point forward, actually, we could be doing both again in the future. We could be adding on additional light duty charging infrastructure through SCE's Charge Ready program, as well as heavy duty, but that's the primary distinction between the two.
Was your question going back to your earlier question between bringing electricity in through the transformer from the outside versus the battery storage on site?
Yeah, I was just curious. It kind of sounds like the transformer is a bigger, heftier power maker.
Yeah, again, in the simple terms is bringing the electricity from power generated offsite from power plants or solar plants or wind farms offsite through the Edison transmission lines onto the site through the transformer in order to deploy to the buses is one way, and that's the current way that we get our electricity. But as we're moving into the future with a lot more distributed solar voltaics throughout the state, right, we're heading towards essentially storage on site if you have a large array of capturing as much electricity from the solar voltaics on site, reducing the load for Edison and the overall grid system. And again, maximizing the balance between distributed on-site electricity production and off-site importation of electricity. So it's just moving towards the future of doing a lot more capturing electricity through solar voltaics on site and hanging on to that electricity through battery storage to use within our vehicles. Does that help?
That helps. Thank you.
Great.
Chair
Olivia, Director
Thank you.
Rodriguez.
On that same vein, if this is what we're moving towards, is there any chance that we will do this at our overpass property? And is there a chance that we can even, do we have to put all 14 there? Is that beneficial versus putting 10 there and 4 at overpass? But I understand that probably creates 2 transformers, which must be a lot more money. But is there any possibility of that in the future, or even of splitting 6 and 6, or the numbers, whatever we want? I don't know if that's just too crazy of a question, but if we have such space, don't we have space at overpass where we might need that kind of infrastructure in the future?
Mr. Estrada?
Yeah, I'll take that question. I think at this stage, maximizing the canopy area into Terminal 1 makes the most sense. We have money to purchase 4 electric buses, which gets us a long way to meeting the obligation to SoCal Edison as a part of this grant requirement for 14. Terminal 2, you're correct. At some point down the line, we will need to do something similar to this. I think that's a project in and of itself. And at that point, we will certainly apply for these grant fundings. I think we'll compete very well. So I think, rest assured, I think we will definitely come after this funding. Edison's been out there preliminarily to take a look at what we've got going on, but we're still quite a ways away from that. We still need to get the basics done at Terminal 2 and do some fencing and some repairs and just get the site recommissioned so that we could use it.
Okay, we have 10 years, right? I mean, I know the 10 years is for these 14, but who knows what can happen in the next 5 years where our technology goes. All right, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Not seeing any. I'm going to ask Madam Clerk, do we have anyone who wishes to speak on this item from the public?
Dave?
Yeah, go ahead, Chucky. Hang on. I'll come back to Christina in a second. Chuck, go ahead.
Okay, so we've got this plan to install the heavy duty chargers. And when and if when we get the big buses in, do we plan on charging the 30 footers and the bigger buses at Terminal 1?
We will be continuing to charge our 30 footers at the same location in Terminal 1. These 4 40 footers, next agenda item, but will be charged on this, under this canopy if it's approved. So we'll be essentially charging both fleets here. There are different chargers involved depending on the manufacturers we're dealing with. So what we intend to purchase and implement under this canopy on this particular agenda item would likely be the ChargePoint CP 250s, which are compatible with New Flyer, Gillig, bus manufacturers, as well as MCI is my understanding, quite a few. So we think we have quite a bit of flexibility as a result.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go around one more time. Other questions before I go to public comment? Going once? Okay, Madam Clerk, anyone wish to speak on this item?
There are no public comments at this time.
Good, thank you very much. Takes us to board comments and to possible motion. Are there any comments before I look for a motion? The motion is going to be to authorize the general manager to execute the Charge Ready Transport Program Participation Agreement with Southern California Edison. That would be the motion we'd be looking for.
Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to make that motion.
Okay, I have a motion from Director Tabor. Do I have a second?
Before you do, could I ask one more question?
Why don't we get a second and then you can ask a question at that point. Do I have a second for the motion?
Second.
A motion from Director Sheeler. Okay, to the right now with the motion on the floor. Director Weinberg, you have a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm concerned, are we paying a premium for all of this shuffling, or is it a necessary thing? Is it the best thing for us in our operation from a cost standpoint, or a necessity because of the layout or the design of the system that we're talking about?
Mr. Strada, you want to just generally give a comment as to the benefits of this Charge Ready program?
Yeah, as it pertains to this agenda item, the Charge Ready program funds pretty much the project in its entirety. So it's a wonderful opportunity for the district and other transit providers around the state. Seems like a straightforward opportunity for us as well. And when you look at our site, it's not really changing any of the locations where we charge. We're going to continue to use the systems we already have. It's expanding our ability and adding additional charge ports on the Terminal 1 facility under the canopy that we invested in a few years ago. So to me, it's just another step along the long-term path, which I think was Director Sheeler's point.
And I would just add, and it'll come in the next item. The state has mandated us to move towards zero electric buses or zero emission buses. And electric is the path that the state is heading down. And Edison is now partnering basically to make that possible by essentially providing grants, and as Director Sheeler indicated, paid for by us taxpayers in order to move that mandate forward. So essentially, we have to do this per state law. We're going to do this in the next 20 years. And in fact, what Edison is doing is basically underwriting for us the cost of doing that mandate. Okay, I have a motion. Good. I have a motion by Mr. Tabor, a second by Mr. Sheeler. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Director Prody is absent, and I will go then to Mr. McQuarrie. Director McQuarrie.
Yes.
Director Weinberg.
Yes.
Thank you. Director Rodriguez.
Yes.
Director Sheeler.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
Chair Davis votes yes. Again, the vote is 6-0 with one absent. Thank you, Mr. Griffin. We're going to come right back to you on the next item. Okay. Next item on our agenda is item 9. This is the purchase of 4 40-foot New Flyer battery electric buses. Mr. Estrada, you want to open up?
Yes, thank you. Again, Mr. Grip will be providing you with the details on this particular recommendation. As the board might recall, MTD was a recipient of federal capital funds a few years ago, a number of years ago at this point, to purchase 14 40-foot buses, 10 of which were diesel, 4 battery electric. The 10 diesel we moved forward with the 4 40-foot electrics, we initially had intended to move forward. I made the decision to hold, which I shared with the board, because I wanted to see some additional progress among the industry and the manufacturers. And what's happened since then is a number of manufacturers have come forward, some of the more traditional ones, such as New Flyer, and the state of California created an opportunity for us to essentially purchase 40-foot electric buses off of a solicitation that they had done. And that's what Mr. Grip is here to tell you about today. I think it's time that we move forward and utilize those funds for their intended purpose. And I think it aligns well with the prior agenda item where we're building out the infrastructure that we're going to need to do it. And we're doing it in the most cost-efficient way that we can from an MTD perspective. So with that said, Mr. Grip, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, General Manager Estrada. As Mr. Estrada mentioned, the board action here is staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to execute an agreement with New Flyer of America in an amount not to exceed $4,778,284 to procure 4 40-foot low-floor battery electric buses and accessories using the California Department of General Services contract. Now, this purchase is contingent upon receipt of Federal Transit Administration mandated pre-award Buy America audit, which is currently underway. A little bit of background. So the buses that we intend to replace if the board authorizes the acquisition of these 4 BEBs from New Flyer are 16 years old. They're 40-foot renewable diesel Gillig buses that are beyond their useful life. The genesis for this, we've already kind of talked about. There's MTD's ZEV goal, which is transitioning MTD's fleet to 100% zero emission vehicles by 2030. And then there is the Innovative Clean Transit Regulation through the California Air Resources Board. And that's really kind of the regulatory push to get transit agencies within the state of California to adopt zero emission vehicles, either electric or hydrogen. So the ICT, to provide a little bit of background for the audience, it was adopted in 2018. It does require transit agencies to produce a ZEB rollout plan for small agencies such as MTD that is due by June 30th of 2023. And really the ZEB rollout plan is just an explanation of how an agency is going to reach the 2040 mandate of having a zero emission fleet. So that's anything from infrastructure to vehicle acquisition plans to how are you training your operators to efficiently operate electric vehicles. All of that has to be encompassed within the plan. Now, there are also bus acquisition thresholds, and for a small agency, by 2026, MTD, 25% of our new vehicle acquisitions have to be zero emission. That 25% continues through 2027, 2028, and then by 2029, 100% of our new vehicle acquisitions have to be zero emission buses. Just for reference, the fleet size definition, the large agency definition is at least 100 buses in annual maximum service in an urbanized area with a population of at least 200,000. So we are under that large agency definition. So we are looking at the small agency thresholds. For this particular project, in terms of budget and funding, the current capital budget has a total allocation of I believe it's 16 million in change for 14 battery electric buses. What that breaks down to is $1,194,571 per bus. So for this particular project, multiply that by 4. That's why we're asking for the $4,778,000. Now, the quote from New Flyer that we received is less than that budgeted amount. It's currently at $1,107,033. What that does is if we authorize the existing budget and we compare that against what the actual quote is currently, that leaves us with about $350,000 for the acquisition of the 4 buses, which we would use as a contingency. Now, why do we need a contingency? A couple reasons. This cost does not include the chargers, so we will have to purchase the chargers themselves, 4 chargers. Current estimates are about $65,000 for the 4 chargers. In addition, there will be a pre-production meeting. And what happens in a pre-production meeting with a bus manufacturer is you dial in every single spec imaginable. Now, to get the quote, we've dialed in all of the major components from fare boxes, ITS equipment, to flooring, seating, and the like. But things may change during pre-production, and that contingency gives us a little bit of breathing room if they do. In terms of potential grant funding, so 3 of the buses, we have applied for the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust funding. That will be $180,000 per vehicle if our application is accepted, and it's up to $100,000, I should mention, or $180,000. And then the 4th bus, we received a Santa Barbara Air Pollution Control District bus replacement grant, and we were awarded $65,455 for that. Unfortunately, that cannot be stacked with the VW Environmental Mitigation Trust funding, but it can be stacked with HVIP monies. Currently, HVIP, the award for the current fiscal year, has not been announced. It has been speculated that it'll be announced around January, early January of 2021. Last fiscal year, the amount per project for a 40-foot battery electric bus was $175,000. So that 175 combined with the APC grant that MTD has already received would bring the total grant monies for that single bus up to $240,000 and change, which is greater than just the standalone VW Environmental Mitigation Trust funding. So that's why we have 2 separate grant funding sources, actually 3 in total, but for 3 of the buses, it's Volkswagen. For 1 of the buses, it's going to be HVIP plus the APCD award that we've already received. In terms of solicitation process for this particular acquisition, as General Manager Estrada alluded to, we looked at the California Department of General Services contract. It's the first time the state has put forth a bus contract, which is fantastic for the transit agencies within the state of California. That represents a lot of time saved for individual agencies, not having to go through a formal request for proposals. However, it should be noted that many transit agencies participated with DGS staff in developing the solicitation for this particular contract. So transit was heavily involved in coming up with the specifications that the state of California utilized for this particular contract. The price was determined to be fair and reasonable based upon MTD's independent cost estimate. That independent cost estimate was developed by reaching out to other transit agencies within the state who have purchased battery electric buses, getting the pricing information, averaging that together. And our ICE was $1,161,982. Our New Flyer quote is currently at $1,107,033, with a difference of $54,949 in our favor, meaning that the New Flyer quote is that much less than our independent cost estimate, less than what other agencies have paid for the buses. I'd like to recognize, before I conclude, Valerie White. She is our new purchasing agent with MTD. She was the one that did the detailed analysis of the DGS contract. She did a wonderful job And she provided a lot of the information that's currently in the staff report. So much appreciated all of her efforts that she put forth. And that concludes my presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Grip, and welcome to Ms. White. Thank her for her work, as you commented on. Thanks for recognizing that. Okay, that takes us to board questions at this point. I'm going to look around and I see one. Anybody else? Director Sheeler, please go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Chair. As you might guess, I have more than several questions. Number one, just to put this into some kind of perspective, we see how much it's going to cost to purchase these 4 electric buses. How much would it have cost us for 4 40-foot clean diesel based on our last diesel purchase? Just to compare the costs of this purchase compared to if we had purchased diesel buses, how much is the difference? Approximately, ballpark.
Mr. Strada?
Well, to be fair, we'd have to conduct a life cycle cost analysis, which we necessarily haven't done at this point because we're purchasing off the solicitation. But I think just from a simple, straightforward answer as far as what is the capital acquisition cost up front, it's probably a few $100,000 if you factor in the rebates that we will likely receive to bring down the cost of the electrics.
That's good information. So it's really not a significant difference in the big picture. Does the cost for these new buses include new personal protective equipment?
What it does,
Go ahead, Ryan.
It does include driver shields, which is my understanding the board has approved recently acquisition of driver compartment shields to protect the operators. These buses will also include those shields as well, the barriers.
Thank you. Does the transit industry agree with
Question.
DGS that New Flyer is superior?
MTD's perspective, really, I can't speak for the industry, Director Sheeler. I can speak for MTD. And in our assessment, I wasn't comfortable recommending acquiring 40 footers from the other manufacturers necessarily at this point. I felt it more appropriate to go with the traditional bus manufacturer with the history of supplying equipment to the industry. And it's never an easy decision, but we felt that this is the right decision for MTD at this point.
Would it have been possible to approach BYD directly as we've been a customer of theirs?
BYD, until recently, hadn't qualified for the DGS solicitation. In other words, my understanding is BYD and other manufacturers all attempted to qualify for this particular solicitation and were unsuccessful. New Flyer did succeed where they did not just recently, and I mean maybe a week or two ago. My understanding is that BYD finally qualified. At that point, we had made a decision to move forward with New Flyer.
Okay. Next question is, maybe speak about the complexity of using multiple manufacturers with multiple chargers.
Sure. This is a challenge that MTD has faced in its past, being a pioneer with battery electric fleets. We had different manufacturers early on, different battery types. It's not easy, and it won't be easy going forward. But we have to make the best recommendation we can based on the information we have before us at any given time. And that's what we've done at this point. We will do our best to manage the different systems. And again, when the next purchase opportunity comes along, we'll recommend what we think is the best product for MTD.
And the last question would be, I just heard from Mr. Grip that the ZEV policy allows for diesel purchases for the next 10 years. What do you anticipate the next best purchase will be for MTD? Will it be clean diesel or will it be electric?
Our focus is on battery electric going forward.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions.
Great, thank you for those questions. Other questions or comments from the board?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Dick. Director Weinberg.
Earlier, you talked about protection for the driver. What is that? Is that something to protect them against the radiation of the transformers, or is that for protection of the passenger overstepping his bounds? What protection are you talking about?
It has to do with the items that the board approved in a previous board meeting, the driver barriers, vapor systems that will be installed by Complete Coach Works. It's a
I think that go more basic. It's basically a shield against COVID-19. It's essentially the passenger shield.
Actually,
Okay,
I'd like to
thank
answer
you.
this a little more thoroughly because I have received response back from some of our employees based on what we had before, Chair Davis. So I want to be thorough.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. I think I wasn't as thorough last time and it led to some, I said, unexpected or misunderstanding. So I want to be clear. The vapor driver barrier system is a product that's in the industry. And I think it's a very good product. And it was designed primarily for assaults, that sort of thing. But we do believe, as I think many of our peers in the industry, that it will help with the COVID pandemic as well by providing a type of barrier for drivers. So we've focused on our diesel fleet because that's the fleet that's in operation and it's our highest priority. Our BYD fleet was brought up last time on that particular item. It's certainly something we will consider doing something like that. They're just not vehicles that we're using much right now. The focus is the diesel fleet, and we'll work with our employees to figure out what the best solution is for the BYD fleet as well. It's just my thoughts have been primarily on the diesel fleet and protecting our employees to the best of our ability. And I think the protocols we've taken by requiring rear door boarding, which we've continued to do for nearly 7 months, has served everyone well. Again, it's about mitigation, and that's what we're trying to do to the best of our ability.
Thank you for the complete explanation and background. I didn't have all that information myself. Thank you, Mr. Estrada. Other questions from the board? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone who wishes to speak under public comment?
We do not have any public comments at this time.
Thank you very much. Takes us to board comments and to a possible motion. And the motion that we're looking for is to authorize the general manager to execute an agreement with New Flyer America, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $4,778,284 to procure 4 40-foot low floor battery electric buses and accessories using the California Department of General Services contract 1192317B, contingent upon the receipt of Federal Transit Administration pre-mandated pre-award Buy America audit report indicating compliance with Buy America requirements, which is currently underway by a third-party auditor contracted by MTD. Are there questions or at this point, comments? Mr. Sheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say there's a lot going on, and it's really exciting to see piece by piece the puzzle starting to come into focus. And I'm interested in the details, and I know there's a lot here, and the board is clearly very interested in it, but I'm just wondering if, to drill down into it, if it's ever possible to talk about this and maybe the ZEV rollout plan at a future fleet and facilities committee meeting, if that committee still exists.
Chair Davis.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
during the pandemic early on, the board, I think it requested that we minimize, the committee meetings, which we've done, but we're 7 months into it. And I think we've done a pretty good job of getting a handle on the Zoom technology remote. So it's possible we could start bringing back some of those committee meetings if that's the prerogative of the board.
Yeah, whenever appropriate. Just wanted to put that out there.
And I think it's a really good comment, Director Sheeler, because what we're seeing basically now is, again, the concept that staff has brought forward to the board. We've worked on the facilities master plan. We're talking about the infrastructure installation of the charge ready installations. we're talking about the purchasing now of 40-foot electric buses. We're moving forward with the vision, which is in our strategic plan. So I really want to compliment Mr. Estrada, General Manager Estrada, Mr. Grip, and all the other people who worked on these programs, because you can see the roadmap basically coming together, essentially implementing the vision and the policies that the board and the state have put together. So my compliments to staff all the way around. Okay.
Thank you.
Are we ready for a motion? Okay, I'm looking for a motion. I read it before. If you want to basically make a motion to staff recommendation, that would be great.
Mr. Chair, I'd be
Shearer?
glad to move the staff recommendation,
Okay.
considering it's consistent with the strategic plan.
Thank you. Mr. Tabor, good motion. Is there a second to that? Mr. Shearer will, okay, Mr. Weinberg got the second on that one. Bill, you didn't unmute, at least on the record. Mr. Weinberg is second. I will do a roll call vote. Director Perotti is not here today. Director McQuarrie. I'll come back to check. Director Weinberg.
Yes.
Director Rodriguez.
Yes.
Director Shearer.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
Director McQuarrie.
Yes.
And Director Chair Davis votes yes. Again, the vote is 6-0 with one absent. Thank you very much, and thank you for the work on this particular item. And like I say, it's really coming together. That moves us to item 10, the on-call A&E Architecture and Engineering Services RFQ Request for Qualifications Contract Award Recommendation. Mr. Estrada, you want to open it up?
Yes, Chair Davis. I'd like to just provide a little overview for the board and the public on how MTD operates. As you can imagine, we are a small staff and we have a very limited resources as it pertains to procurement resources. Mr. Grip, our capital projects manager, who my preference is that he focus on project delivery, grant opportunities, et cetera, also helps with solicitations. Even our grants and compliance manager, Mr. Moss, helps at times, as does our procurement officer, Mr. Davis. The addition of Valerie White was crucial to MTD going forward to help us move along a lot of these projects and make sure that we're doing it in the appropriate way. So along those lines, it's not uncommon for smaller agencies like MTD to do a solicitation for on-call services, professional services, in this case, A&E. So it's something we've done before, and we're recommending we do the same thing here. What it does is it makes it a little bit more efficient for us as a staff to move forward, move projects forward in a reasonable way. And I think it maximizes the use of our human resources as well. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Mr. Grip again to give you the details on this particular solicitation. I'm available to answer any questions on kind of the big picture. Ryan can handle the details of the solicitation. Ryan?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Grip.
Thank you, General Manager Estrada. So the recommendation is staff is requesting the board to authorize the general manager to enter into a contract with Stantec Architecture, Inc. for the on-call architectural design and engineering services for a term of 3 years with 2 one-year option, 1-year contract extension options that may be exercised if mutually agreed to by MTD and Stantec Architecture, Inc. To provide a little bit of background, which Mr. Estrada has already done, really the genesis of this is the sheer volume of capital projects that we have on the horizon, many of which require architectural and engineering services. So as Mr. Estrada stated, there's a kind of an efficiency that takes place when we have an existing contract and we can call upon an A&E services group when we have these types of projects rolling out. How are the projects determined or initiated? That's through the task orders. So we will provide to Stantec Architecture these task orders that will provide details about the specific scope of work of a particular project type. And it'll also outline, when we'd like to get that project completed. They will then in return provide us with a cost proposal that will be based upon the rates that they provided in their submittal. The contractor requirements are fairly standard. This is kind of high level, but it's, coordinating and communicating with local jurisdictions and the public. It's developing conceptual designs that we can share with the board and with the public and MTD personnel to say, this is what we're looking at. How does this look to you? Should we make any changes? And then creating the plans and specifications for bidding. So the bid package that will go to the particular jurisdiction and, get approved ultimately. And then construction oversight. And that's a key piece too, being able to ensure that what's actually being constructed is in accordance with those plans and specifications that they created. The potential projects that we included in the scope of work for this particular solicitation, Terminal 2 reactivation, Mr. Estrada already referenced that. So we're going to bring Terminal 2 back to life. In order to do so, there are some fairly modest improvements that need to take place with existing concrete, canopy structures, tenant improvements to existing buildings, fueling infrastructure, and the like. So that'll be something that we'll be moving forward with in the future. Energy storage and photovoltaic system design and installation, something we talked about quite a bit during this meeting. That'll be critical to make sure that we have a strong design team that can come up with a good scheme for MTD in terms of, as we talked about, size of batteries, photovoltaics. Do we add additional canopies so that we can put photovoltaics on top of those canopies? These are all things that will be fleshed out through our A&E services contractor. Electrical infrastructure upgrades. While SCE is providing the lion's share of infrastructure for 14 charge ports, there is still that piece that I mentioned from the disconnect. That's where SCE's work stops to the actual chargers themselves. And we're going to need a design firm to assist us with that. So that will be an upcoming project as well. And then general facilities maintenance and upgrades. There are always ongoing upgrades that take place that need to happen due to age of existing facilities. So that will be a component of the work that they undertake as well. In terms of budget and funding, there's no specific budget because there are no guaranteed projects. So one thing that I want to highlight is we indicated in the scope of work that MTD may never reach out with a task order, meaning that within the 3-year base contract, there may never be work provided to Stantec. We reserve that right. And I think that that's kind of important to note. So there isn't necessarily a specific budget ask. However, when we engage in these projects, obviously, then that's when the capital budget piece will come into it. In terms of the solicitation process, we engaged in a request for qualifications. That procurement process is used to evaluate qualifications above all else. So it's not like an invitation for bid where you're looking specifically at price, or even a request for a proposal where you're looking kind of for a best fit. In this particular case, your primary focus are the qualifications of the A&E firms. The RFQ process that we engaged in terms of our bidders list, it was quite robust. We had 35 A&E firms that were on the bidders list. Ultimately, in terms of the submittal deadline and how many we actually received, we received 10 submittals, which is fairly significant, particularly given the amount of work that they have to put into developing their submittal. One was eliminated because it wasn't responsive. So there's a qualification in the scope of work that they had to have an office within 75 road miles of Terminal 1. And unfortunately, one of the 10 were just outside of the parameters. They were at about 92 miles. So unfortunately, they were disqualified. But we weren't able to evaluate the other 9. The evaluation committee was, and that committee consisted of Nolan Robertson, MTD's fleet and facilities manager, Rob Lurie, who is an MTD maintenance supervisor, but formerly worked for Gold Coast Transit, and he was Gold Coast Transit District's Fleet and Facilities Manager, and then myself. We scored all 9 of the proposals based upon technical qualifications and experience, qualifications of key personnel, the work plan, and the record of past performance. Now, based upon those scores, we were able to narrow those 9 down to a top 3 in what we call our competitive range. Those 3 firms were Stantec, Rasmussen and Associates, a Ventura County-based firm, and then Buildston Architecture and Planning, which is a local Santa Barbara firm. After we determined the competitive range, we engaged in interviews with those 3 firms, and we engaged in interviews over Zoom, and the evaluation committee were the interviewers, and the highest scoring firm of the 3 through the interview process was Stantec. And in the staff report, we indicated the reasons we felt that they were kind of the best performers and overall in terms of their submittal. So please take a look when you have an opportunity at those highlights there. We requested a best and final offer of Stantec, which is traditional. We asked specifically about rates that they had included with their submittal. We asked for a decrease in some of those hourly rates that we thought were a little bit too high. They kind of met us in the middle. And after evaluating that BAFO, the best and final offer, we determined their pricing to be fair and reasonable. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grip. Are there questions from the board at this point? Director Rodriguez, I'm now going to Director Sheeler. Olivia?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan, for that presentation. I'm just wondering, when it's this kind of contract that's kind of open and kind of not sure if we'll need them, will we ever be, and this is kind of a legal question, but will we ever be in breach of contract if we do a project that maybe they thought we should do through them and we go somewhere else? How open is this? You know, I mean, how do they plan? I mean, I'm thinking every business wants to plan like what kind of money they might be making, you know, their income or whatever. And we tell them that there's a potential, but not really. I mean, does this happen a lot out in the industry where we award a contract, but it may nothing may ever happen?
I'll take that question.
Okay, Mr. Estrada.
Yeah, it's pretty common to have an on-call type of services agreement in the industry. They're professionals and they understand what's involved. We will come to them with each project and we'll work out terms at that point when the opportunity presents itself. But also our standard language is included in the contract. If we got to a point where we felt we needed to terminate the agreement, we can't. That's always an option for MTD. Rule number 1 going into these agreements is make sure you have your termination clauses. But frankly, when you look at just look at this agenda, the amount of work we have coming and the number of projects, I don't think there's any question that we've got work for Stantec if the board approves this recommendation. There's plenty going forward, and we're always getting things done. So I'm not really too concerned with that. We're just trying to give you some assurances that we've considered all of those potential outcomes and that we've prepared for them.
Follow-up question?
Go ahead, please.
But okay, so when you say we have a termination clause, the termination clause is for like, there's no for cause, it's kind of like an at will. Whenever somebody gives somebody 30 days notice, is that what it is for whatever reason, where someone's not going to turn around? And do you understand? I'm not as familiar with, I don't know if we've ever had one of these on calls type contracts that I recall, but I'm assuming that our attorneys go through this, set up contract, and will that be brought back to us or not?
Our
It's just in
attorney,
these times of COVID and that this situation may be going on for a while. I just, that to me, a 3-year term, I don't know, could be good for us, but I'm just wondering, that seems like a long term for me at this point, but it's just my recommendation, my thoughts.
we have done this before. Currently, we have Lenvick and Minor providing A&E services, which we brought to the board in a very similar fashion. So this isn't uncommon. They've done a number of projects for us over the past years, from bus stops to the transit center itself. So
Okay.
this is actually pretty consistent with what we've done in the past. I think we've tightened it up a little bit. Legal counsel will actually absolutely go through the contract. And yeah, I think it's pretty much standard operating procedures for us.
Okay.
Okay, other questions, comments? Bill, Director Sheeler?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Stantec did our facilities master plan, and I thought that was very, very thorough and well done. And so I guess my question is, the people that produced that for us, will they be associated with this contract? Is there any continuity of key staff at Stantec who already have a relationship with what MTD's trying to accomplish?
Ryan?
Yeah, great question, Director Sheeler. Yes, there are. So we had, for the facilities master plan, as you probably recall, it was divided into 2 teams. There was the kind of A&E team, and they were evaluating existing structures and also kind of indicating what facilities, equipment we would need into the future. And then we had the planning team, if you will. The planning team was tasked with evaluating existing operations and projecting what those operations will look like into the future. So, what will the demand be on MTD facilities 10, 15 years down the road? So we will be working with that A&E team, the same group of people that came on site, did an evaluation of our existing facilities, and provided facilities recommendations, which also included kind of the reactivation of Terminal 2.
Okay, and I guess the last thing, this is sort of a question, if you could just maybe speak to it just a little bit more, but I noticed in the staff report, I don't know how you do these comparisons when you're comparing apples to apples, but the ultimate cost for possible scope of work when you're attributing billable costs per an associated expertise. And the staff report talks about working with Stantec and getting a best and final offer, and then working out what you recall a billing rate reduction additionally. And even with the billing rate reduction, that their costs are more than the other ones in comparison, but are still considered to be fair and reasonable. Maybe you could just talk about that a little bit more, please.
Happy to do it. So what we did is we compare with the information that we have access to. One of the challenges is we can only open the price proposal, which is in the sealed envelope and comes with the entire submittal for the contractor we intend to negotiate with. So unfortunately, we can't see pricing from the other 8. So what we do is we look back to prior contracts. So we looked at the facilities master plan, because within the submittal for the facilities master plan, it provided a breakdown of the hourly rates for all of the design professionals. So we were able to compare that with the hourly rates in the design professionals in the submittal that Stantec provided. Additionally, as mentioned prior, we have the incumbent, our existing contract. Now, the existing contract's a little tough. We were able to negotiate a favorable rate throughout the entire contract period with our incumbent. It just increases by CPI. But what I did is I averaged that rate, so today's rate with the incumbent based upon an increase by CPI over the past 5 or so years, with the rates provided by Stantec through the facilities master plan to get an average rate. Then compared that against what the rates were in the submittal, and determined that anything that exceeded kind of a 5 to 10% threshold was a rate that we felt was too high and we wanted to negotiate down. And that's exactly what happened. Within those rates, they negotiated down to either to the facilities master plan level in terms of the hourly rates or less than in some cases.
Thank you for that explanation.
Other questions? Okay, I actually have two, if I could. You know, Mr. Grip, on the outline of the service requirements, you have concept design, construction documents, bid assistance, construction administration, and additional requirements, but nowhere did it mention permitting. Is permitting included within there? Is that part of the what these people would be handling?
Yes, it is. That's a great question, and that should have been included. Our expectation would be that Stantec, once they have the permit package together, would be bringing it to the city of Santa Barbara. And as you are all too familiar with, there's usually a back and forth exchange where there are modifications that need to be made to the permit package to satisfy the jurisdiction's requirements. So that kind of back and forth effort would be part of their scope of services. You're exactly right.
Good, great, thanks. That answers that question. Then my last question is capacity. You have 3 fairly good sized projects right here, and there's other work going on at Stantec. I did not see capacity in the evaluation criteria, but I am assuming you guys assess that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
We did. Thank you, Chair Davis. That's an excellent point. That was one of the questions that we actually, I think we had 2 of the questions, our standard interview questions of the 3 finalists that we had interviewed. And capacity is a large concern. Some of the larger transit agencies, in fact, will do what they call a bench contract, where they will actually award a contract to 3 different A&E services firms. So their top 3. And then they'll do kind of a round robin rotation where they'll say, okay, you get this project. Now you're engaged in this project. Now it's your turn. And they continue to do that. You know, based upon the things that General Manager Estrada was indicating, where there are capacity issues and it's challenging to try and manage 3 different firms, Stantec provided us with assurances they would absolutely have the capacity to undertake any projects that we put forth. One of the advantages of working with Stantec is they have a local office, and within that local office, I think they have about 35 personnel. So it's a fairly sizable local office. They also have an international presence, and a massive one at that. And so what they indicated during the interview is they used a baseball analogy. They said that they have a deep bench, right? They have a lot of in-house architectural and engineering personnel that they can pull from to engage in any MTD project that we bring forth. And that was significant, I think, for the evaluation committee, because we recognized that some of the firms that we were interviewing or engaging with were extremely talented, but had a limited pool of staff. And so, as you mentioned, with all the projects that we have on the horizon, would they really be able to fulfill our requested projects in a timely manner? You know, and a lot of them had sub-consultants, and the challenge of sub-consultants is always, okay, we're working with the prime contractor, they're then working with the sub-consultants. We don't really have much authority on what takes place. So you have kind of a degree of separation and you lose some efficiency there. So one of the things we really liked about Stantec is that they have very few sub-consultants that were named for this particular contract, and the majority of people that would be working on MTD projects would be in-house personnel, and there are quite a few of them.
Thank you for that answer, because when I looked at the list of firms, that was one of the issues that I would have been concerned about, and your answer there really makes me comfortable that in fact that was considered, and I think it's a good choice in that regard. Okay, so at this point, if there are no other questions from the board, Madam Clerk, is there anyone? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Tabor.
It is more comment. I'm glad the way the descriptions and the categories were laid out here for us. It's not coming down to one firm has better key personnel and other firm has better past performances. It's actually Stantec excelled, had the higher score in all 4 categories. I just wanted to point.
Good point, a really good point. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm gonna look for any other comments at this point. Seeing no one, Madam Clerk, anyone from the public wishing to comment?
We have no public comments at this time.
Okay, that would then move us into board comments and or motion. And I think Mr. Grip outlined the staff recommendation of the contract with Stantec for on-call A&E services. Any other comments at this point? Then I'd be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move the staff report recommendation.
I have Mr. Director Tabor making the staff recommendation.
Second,
Director Rodriguez doing the second. Okay, we will do a roll call on this motion. Director Prodi is absent. Director McQuarrie,
Yes.
Director Weinberg,
Yes.
Director Rodriguez,
yes.
Director Sheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor,
Yes.
and Chair Davis votes yes. Motion passes 6-0 with one absent. Again, excellent report. You did the trifecta today, Mr. Grip. That's really good. Very good.
Thank you very much, Chair Davis.
Okay, that takes us to item 11, General Manager's Report. Mr. Estrada.
Yes, Chair Davis, first of all, I'd like to echo what you just said. Mr. Grip has done a fantastic job for us.
Sure has.
You haven't
Sure
seen
has.
much of him during the pandemic, but he's been busy, and you'll be seeing more of him probably over the next few meetings because there's still additional items coming forward. As for the general manager report, first at the top of the list, COVID-19. Wanted to give you a little bit update. As you know, we had an employee test positive recently.
Chuck, you want to mute? Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, as you know, we had an employee test positive recently. We went through our protocols, which I think are very strong. And we constantly review those protocols to see how we can improve them. I want to be clear for anyone who's listening, MTD and myself in particular value human life and our employees and our customers. And that's first and foremost in our thoughts at all times when we're discussing our protocols, any additional systems or equipment that we're purchasing for the future as we look toward business recovery. So when we're making recommendations, whether it's driver barriers or air filtration systems, there's the thought, what can we do now? But there's also what can we do in the future as we start to progress and advance and things get better with the pandemic. And I need to make sure I do a good job of articulating that when we bring those items forward, so it's clear what our mindset is when we're discussing it. We're talking about right now, we're talking about the future and advancing through the pandemic. So overall, 7 months into it, we've had 2 positives. We've taken all the precautions that we can with disinfecting buses that we can think of, and we're always open to suggestions and ways to improve things. And I'd like to thank all of our employees and our union who has worked with us, a representation to get us to this point and doing our best to keep everyone safe. With that said, I've got a couple other announcements here, a couple of retirements. Sal Alvarez and Javier Jimenez, after very long distinguished careers with MTD, have retired. Couldn't be happier for these 2 gentlemen. Personally, I will miss both of them. They're great individuals to work with, but happy for them personally and wish them the best. Also, the transit center, as you may have seen, we've produced some social media. We are back operating in the circle. The building itself is still closed to the public and will remain so probably through the rest of the year, at least until we get to the point where we're collecting fares again. And there's no given set date for when that will happen. But for now, we will operate outside the building, and it seems to be going very well. And the city, thank you to the city for allowing us to keep some of the stops on Figueroa so that we can spread folks out a little bit during the pandemic. So it's much appreciated. Also on Calle Real, that particular solicitation is ongoing. We have extended the deadline for submittals by 2 weeks based on a request by one of the potential bidders. We felt that it was a fair request because there was essentially an issue with information we had directed the potential bidders to on the website that we corrected. So we gave them an extra 2 weeks. We don't think that'll change the overall timeline for us. Also, we're progressing well on our single audit, the annual financial audit. The finance staff is moving forward with the consultant or the auditor with that, and we hope to bring that to you probably in the next 30 days. IT is doing some good work. And as you can see, our procurement staff has been extremely busy, and they're doing a lot of other projects as well and some other items that we'll be bringing forward. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions for General Manager Estrada? Mr. Sheeler, Director Sheeler, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to follow up on the Kyriot project. So does that now make that October 15th?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. The general manager's report referred to an addendum replying to questions that interested firms had asked. Is the addendum something that would be shared with the ad hoc committee or the board, or is that?
Absolutely. We'll share it with the ad hoc committee. There's a few of them, some minor ones, but we'll get that to you with the next issuance.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd be interested in just knowing all the particulars of this. And let's see. The last one I wanted to ask more about was the MTD planning staff working with Isla Vista Community Services District and the county, youth projects, et cetera. What might MTD's possible role be for mobility projects other than line 27?
I believe Ms. Blackerby is available to potentially answer that question. She's been spearheading that particular effort for us. Hillary, I know you're out there.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Hi, Chair Davis and Board Member Sheeler. Yes, so the application is for, creating a Isla Vista community mobility plan, and that involves all different modes of transportation. And so it's really to get a holistic look at how Isla Vistans get around now, and how they might get around in the future, looking towards, clean transportation and, reducing the reliance on personal car ownership and having a car there in Isla Vista. Obviously, we're already a huge part of transportation in IB. We want to be, an integral part in the future, get more people to consider us as a mode, but obviously bikes have a major place there, walking, but there is still quite a bit of sort of parking and car ownership stress. So we would be involved in the outreach. We'd be involved in some possible pop-ups. One of the things that we've discussed as part of the project, if funded, is maybe a pop-up bus-only lane or bus-only lanes on El Colegio, for example. So just sort of testing things out with certain residents, with maybe some bus passes, things like that. So we just want to be a part of the conversation and helping them take a holistic look. And we feel like when we take a holistic look at transportation, it definitely benefits transit.
Thank you. That was all my questions.
Any other questions for General Manager Estrada at this point? Okay, not seeing any. Item 12, other business and reports. I don't know if there have been any committee meetings, Jerry. Anything else under this item?
No, none I can think of other than the Cayo Real item
Yeah.
that we discussed in the general
Good.
manager's report.
Good, okay. Well, before we adjourn, I just want to thank everybody. It was a good meeting. Staff did a tremendous amount of work. We see the tip of the iceberg when it ends up on our plate. I know there's so much work that goes behind it. So I know, speaking for all the members of the board, Jerry, please pass on to staff again our thanks for all the hard work that they're doing under these trying times, and they are very much trying times in that regard. Our next meeting is October 6th at 8:30 a.m. And I would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion to adjourn. Is there a second? I will second it. Get that motion out there. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, unanimous. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you at our next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.